I'd like to introduce Ravi. And I don't even know if I'm going to attempt to say his last name. He'll have to help me out on that. We'll find out how to pronounce his name in just a bit here. But he's a seasoned software engineer with a focus on semantic data solutions for healthcare, and has over 15 plus years in the field. He's been specializing in building knowledge graphs to empower decision support tools at the point of care. This primarily incorporates semantic knowledge graph, ontology-based, and a data-centric approach to these applications. And I believe that you're coming from us from New Zealand or Australia. Where are you calling from, Ravi?
I'm currently in Kathmandu, Nepal.
Okay. All right. Well, I was wrong on that account. And please share your full name and provide an introduction, and I'll give you the floor.
Sure. My name is Ravi Bajracharya. I am currently the CTO and co-founder of Datum. So I'm glad to get started. Hi everyone. My name is Ravi. I'm the CTO, co-founder of Datum. Datum is a connected health platform that brings together biomedical knowledge and health data for applications in precision medicine and decision support. Today, I would like to talk a little bit about complexity in software and how we end up introducing complexity through our choices, and how those complexity impact the process of building applications in healthcare, particularly in precision medicine, and also some challenges of integrating biomedical knowledge bases into health applications. And finally, we'll take a look at an Apollo platform that Datum is building, and some of its use cases, particularly in pharmacogenomics. When you talk about complexity in software, there's an inherent complexity involved with the problem you're trying to solve. Like, for example, the compute complexity of the algorithm you're trying to implement. But outside of that, we also introduce complexity through our choices of the tools, architecture, and model that we use to solve the problem. And these are referred to more as incidental complexity. One example could be the configuration challenges that gets introduced because of our choices of production environment. And they generally have nothing to do with the inherent problem that you're trying to solve, and may not add much value to the ultimate solution. So I think it's better to kind of mitigate them or to kind of avoid them altogether if possible. When we shift our gear to healthcare, we know that health systems are kind of inherently complex in that they require coordination across different faculties and domains in healthcare, and also a lot of compliance requirements. And on top of it, there's a lot of requirements for integrating diverse types of data sets across the domain and subdomain. In general, you are dealing with quite a bit of complexity when you're building health systems. But on top of it, you also end up introducing a lot of incidental complexity through, for example, your choices of data model, which might be more application or use case driven, as a result of which it kind of introduces more silos in your system, data silos, because like your data model might not be compatible with others in the systems, or downstream for other types of purposes. Secondly, I think these days it's become a lot easier to also add complexity to our software, because it's very easy to just grab something that you need and integrate into your system without giving much thought about how it's actually impacting the way your system is generating data or using data or persisting your data downstream. So it's, for example, it's very easy to do like npm install in JavaScript or pip install in Python and grab the module you need without kind of taking into account the complexity it's introducing to our system. Um, Also, most of the tools available for our systems are mostly more use case driven or application driven, and there's generally a dearth of data centric tools. So as a result, it's very easy to also kind of add data silos in your applications as a result of that. So the comparison we could do is probably with like health foods. Like it's we know everybody wants to get healthy, eat healthy, uh, but it's easy to just grab something junk food, for example. Um, so these complexities also translates into uh, precision medicine, which is a subdomain in healthcare. Um, so one of the main problems applications deals with is data silos, where um, the data needed by the application is distributed across multitudes of systems, applications, or even it's outside the system in paper form, like in case of genetic test results, for example, for patients. Um, and often there's a lot of effort needed to sort of integrate them. Um, Often the approach is to kind of build data pipelines that bring together these data sets, um, that transforms and kind of integrates different types of data. Uh, but this is done for one application, and you have to sort of rinse and repeat for the next application again. Um, Similarly, the developers working on these problems are not subject matter experts generally, and there's a lot of back and forth between the subject matter experts and the development team. Um, and this process can be fairly expensive to scale to a lot of applications in the domain. So as a result, a lot of these bespoke applications are trialed as proof of concepts, and they eventually end up um, in the proof of concept wasteland. Um, Basically, there is a long tail of vertical applications in healthcare, which are implemented as bespoke applications. They might have started as proof of concepts, and they also eventually contribute to data silos in the ecosystem. Um, and one casualty of this complexity is also the biomedical knowledge bases in healthcare. So healthcare in general has an abundance of biomedical knowledge bases, but they are rarely integrated into broader applications beyond their immediate scope of use, right? Which usually is in research. But and uh, The reason is like that these data sets are not necessarily kind of built with that intent of integrating into applications. They don't have like standardization or semantic interoperability incorporated when they're distributed. Um, so as a result, like it's fairly difficult to do that for most of the knowledge bases, and this is rather unfortunate because most of the applications can actually benefit from integration of these knowledge bases. It's not just a research like drug discovery that should be using these knowledge bases. Um, so I don't want to bring down the room by just talking about how complex it is to build applications in healthcare. Uh, but I guess there's a silver lining in that, these complexities are introduced through our own choices. And if we understand clearly the implications of our decision, we can actually revert and maybe uh, choose something simpler, right? So, like Dijkstra once put it, like, simplicity is a prerequisite for reliability. So maybe um, making that decision can kind of uh, build more simpler, more reliable systems. Um, so the new approach is probably to get away from the application-centric mindset, which is kind of introducing these complexities in the system, and move more towards data-centric architecture, where we take the data assets of an enterprise and make it the core component of a connected data platform, on top of which we can build applications, thereby kind of removing silos, at least the data silos. Um, and as Dave Muckham, our proponent of data-centric architecture and also president of Semantic Arts, he recently, in an appearance in a podcast, he very succinctly put it like, saying like a single, simple, extensible, and federable ontology becomes the key to unifying the vast complexity of the typical enterprise datascape. Uh, and and uh, and if you could pair that single data model with a model-driven UI, which is kind of built on top of the semantics of the underlying data model, to allow the subject matter experts to kind of build applications on top of that data platform, then I think it's a very perfect um, solution to reduce the complexities that we just kind of took a look at, because it kind of helps the subject matter experts to build application to their specification, thereby reducing chances of kind of these applications not seeing the light of day. Um, so the Apollo platform at Datum is something that we are aspiring to kind of adopt this more data-centric approach, where uh, we take a growing catalog of datasets and compose it into a cohesive knowledge graph as a connected data platform, and make it available for more broader applications through API access, and also through a no-code platform that builds on top of this singular data pipeline, to allow subject matter experts to easily build applications on top. Um, and like Andrew Ong is kind of, has been nudging everybody to move away from model centric architecture to more data centric AI applications, for AI applications. um, and I think Apollo uh, uh, can do that, where um, the underlying data model can enable uh, better generative AI performance. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about it later, uh, later in the slides. Um, so Datum Apollo basically uh, adopts like FAIR principles for most of the biomedical data sources that it's trying to integrate into the platform. Um, so FAIR meaning definable, accessible, interoperable, reusable. Um, but on top of it, it also links the related data sources together, because there's more value when you can link one data source to another. So it's not just enough to make it fair, but kind of having it linked into a cohesive knowledge graph is much more valuable, um, and and we make it uh, easily accessible through an API layer on top. Um, and the the knowledge graph we build is kind of built on top of a baseline knowledge graph that is composed of the underlying terminologies and ontologies, which are domain specific. So one I've listed here is UMLS, which stands for unified medical language system. But that's a more general kind of a terminology system. But we also take more domain-specific ontologies, for example, and we augment it with more domain-specific data sets like the drug data, clinical trial, gene variants data sets. And for precision medicines, we also ingest a lot of guidelines and publications. Um, so the first use case that we are looking at with Apollo is pharmacogenomics, which is a study of how an individual's genomic profile can affect how they respond to drugs. So different pharmacogenes and their mutations in individuals form some genomic profile or phenotype or genotype, which can affect the way a drug is metabolized or transported, or how it is accepted within the body. And there's a, 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 a variety of kind of evidence from very strong to weak that kind of links these recommendations to evidence. And these are all compiled into guidelines in pharmacogenomics. And one of them is CPIC, which stands for Clinical Pharmacogenomics Implementation Consortium Guideline. It's more the globally accepted guideline, and it's distributed more as a semi-structured, in that it's available in tabular plus also as a publication. There are also other guidelines which are maybe regional, like Dutch, Canadian, French, Japanese, and so on. So with Apollo, we have built a data platform that ingests these guidelines and creates a connected knowledge graph on top of which we can kind of build build applications such as Flow Builder, which allows subject matter experts to take in those guidelines and build decision support flows by composing different types of questionnaires guided by the knowledge graph, which can then be deployed into pharmacogenomics apps. And this platform also integrates with LLM to be able to kind of provide certain generative aspects to the guideline, which I'll talk a little bit more about pretty shortly. So one of the things that we have built into Apollo for pharmacogenomics is a semi-automated data pipeline, which can ingest the different data sources in pharmacogenomics, including the research data sets, which includes like the evidence-based publications and references. And this is ingested into the PGX knowledge graph, which is then made available to the builders through a no-code application builder. And we also expose it as API, which the developers in the ecosystem can actually build a PGX application using those APIs. So this is a quick snapshot of the PGX knowledge graph, where on the left we can see some of the components that are ingested. And on the right, we have just a snapshot of like how a drug is, for example, linked to the gene along with the guideline and the recommendations. And we can also see some of the entities are resolved to their underlying terminology, like genes are resolved to AGNC symbols and so forth. Um, and so I'll briefly kind of show a video that kind of shows how a subject matter expert could use our flow builder to kind of construct, take a guideline and construct a decision support flow and then deploy it to an app. So
this is Datum's no-code application builder. A researcher or a biomedical scientist would come in and either create an account or log in. I already have an account, so I'm logging in. They would land onto the homepage of the builder where they can see pre-built canvases. They can create a new one. They can name their canvas. Here I will be building out a very simple flow for warfarin. This is a prompt for the system to look up the right guidelines for warfarin. Basically here, I've built out the part of the flow off screen, so I'm not going to show that. Here you can see the name of the drug and questions about the patient history. If I wanted to modify an existing flow, I would simply add a new box and edit the flow. As clinicians are creating these flows, this clinical knowledge is also being captured and incorporated within the knowledge graph in the form of directed acyclic graphs or DAGs. The advantage of this is that you can run analytics on this data. This is an example of a simple use case of creating a drug-gene interaction flow for warfarin. This pharmacogenomic clinical decision support tool is the first of many applications we will be building using our platform. Here I'm acting as a clinician and building out this flow, creating simple questions and response options in the flow. When we actually have EHR integration, we'll be pulling all this information from the EHR so that the clinician doesn't have to write these questions out themselves. We'll simply pull these details and populate the flow, including information on the patient's genetic information if it is available. The reason we're creating a flow in this way for now is we can deploy this independently as a web app, so all pharmacists all over the world can start using it, even if they don't have any EHR tools available at hand. They'll also be able to input these details manually and get the recommendations for their patients directly from our tool. So once the clinician has created the flow, as you can see on the right-hand side, they can preview and basically they can go through the web app as if in a normal web app, and we can directly deploy this. We recently incorporated LLMs into the flow builder, so I'm going to show you a couple examples of that. We took OpenAI's GPT-4 and fine-tuned on the clinician-built flows we have so far to get the results. What this does is it'll automatically populate these flows, as you can see here. So basically, it's the same way GitHub Copilot runs. The clinician, in our case, will be able to select the flow that closely matches what they have in mind, and they can modify the flow to get to the final application. There is significant latency. As you can see, it's pretty slow. This is because we need to improve it with more compute, more fine-tuning, and high-quality data. But let's see how it goes. So, okay, it looks like this is not the right flow that I'm expecting. As a clinician, I would just say, this is not good enough. I would look through all of it and say regenerate. It has regenerated another flow. So looking through this, it doesn't look like it's good enough still, which means I will regenerate again. And basically doing this a few times will help train the LLM better, and this is saving me time. And since all of this data is coming from the underlying knowledge graph, which is just a collection of facts from CPIC guidelines and FDA tables, chances are the LLM being trained is not going to be providing the incorrect information. Obviously, this is still chances of hallucination, but given that it's coming from the knowledge base, that is significantly reduced.
that is my co-founder. In the video you saw, like there was also a generative AI component where the OpenAI model GPT-4 was able to take a semantic graph and then be able to kind of suggest a flow to the subject matter expert, in this case is the pharmacogenomist, and they can kind of run through a couple of those iterations to be able to confirm which one they're thinking. And recently there's a Gartner report where they kind of you know hinted like combining an LLM with the semantic graph it leads to actually very good performance in terms of the responses from the generative AI, and we were able to validate that because like most of the guidelines we incorporated were in that form, and also tabular form. LLM was surprisingly able to interpret that very well. Um, so so with Datum, it's not just a data platform to build clinical applications on top of it, but you can also build generative AI applications with this platform. Um, oh, sorry. So I'm just gonna quickly wrap up by kind of talking a little bit about the vision of the product that, especially with respect to Apollo. We saw a quick use case in pharmacogenomics, but our vision is mainly to kind of extend it beyond that into more the broader kind of healthcare domain where we could take any biomedical knowledge basis and make it accessible to uh, broader applications in health and biomedicine. Um, um, it's very unfortunate that today we only kind of see the reusability of these knowledge bases in research. Um, and the other goal is to kind of make data-centric tech stack available to application builders, including subject matter experts, the non-technical users. Um, uh, so that's where, like, no-code builders that are kind of built on the semantics of the data model kind of it pairs very well with the underlying knowledge graph, um, and also to enable subject matter experts to build the next generation of decision support and clinical applications, because this tech stack really simplifies the way we think of like clinical applications. Um, uh, it takes away a lot of the complexities that we talked about earlier. Finally, we want to kind of make trading applications more simpler and reliable and effective in the process. So with that, I would probably like to open the floor for any
All right.
questions.
Yep. Our first question here. Are there any ACL considerations to deal with regarding access to the underlying data via the builder? If so, where in the tech stack is access limited?
Yeah, we can actually limit it at a couple of layers. Definitely at the application level itself. So if you take Flow Builder, there's a certain level of vetting process that goes on, in the sense like um, we have somebody who builds a flow out and pushes it to the production. So there's certain level of kind of role-based access control going on at the application level. Um, um, but we can also do that at the data level, where we have like certain subgraphs that we probably don't want to kind of give access to certain um, uh, uh, users or group of users. We are able to do that at the graph level as well, so all the way down to the data level. So
Great. Let's see. Next question. Do you give an example of these applications? I saw the flow, but had a hard time to understand what it does.
Uh, um, so basically, the flow is kind of it's just a questionnaire. It's kind of built on top of the guideline that was ingested into the knowledge graph. Um, so if the guideline says like for a particular phenotype, ask these questions, and if the answer is yes, then you kind of prescribe a certain doses of the drug, for example. So the guideline has sort of like a questionnaire kind of a flow. So the flow builder kind of try to mimic that, but it's actually integrated with the knowledge graph in the sense it can further enrich those questions with things that you can pull in from the knowledge graph, like if you look at the phenotype of a particular gene, then it can already pull that into the flow builder so that somebody building it doesn't need to kind of enter all those options, for example. And um, moreover, those answers are already linked to the knowledge graph. Um, so as a result, like when you publish these flows to the app, it's not just a questionnaire, but you can actually pull in more enriched data from the knowledge graph. So if the user wants to know what does a normal metabolizer mean for a particular gene like CYP2C19, for example, then it's able to kind of pull that in from the guideline and show that to the user. So it's more of a layered experience for the user. So they can just answer the questions, or they can kind of dig in deeper into the knowledge base and the guideline, and also explore the evidence behind why a certain recommendations was done, for example, by the flow.
Next one. Do you have semantic consistency guardrails in place for users creating new flows?
Not at the moment. Currently, so we kind of have it a little bit kind of a free form. So we do have to kind of do a process to determine like what they what they mean in a particular question, and we do match it to the guideline, like where they are in the guideline. So but the guardrail actually comes in so the one thing I didn't mention in the video was or I think my co-founder might have mentioned in the video, where these questions can actually be answered from an EHR. So it's actually running a script in the back that kind of fetches the data based on the question. Like for example, if the question is the patient over 75 years or older, you can actually fetch that answer from an EHR. So those things we try to kind of control how those are kind of generated by the flow builder, and how the system kind of evaluates them. But in terms of the actual flow and the text, the only guardrail is probably like the types of things you can add in the flow, like the prompts, the questions. So there's a certain data structure there, but in terms of the actual text you can enter for like a node or questions, it's kind of a free form, and we kind of try to autocomplete things where relevant, if it exists in the knowledge graph.
Great. We've got two more here. Could you expand upon the resource augmentation procedure used for accessing and feeding graph into your calls to the LLM?
Sure. So we initially tried with just kind of extracting just a tabular data in the guidelines, because LLMs has a fairly good interpretation of the relationship within a table, and we kind of realize, like, it's actually performing better with like just a relationship of a graph, kind of represented in a data format, and fed into the prompt. So I think that seemed to work pretty well as well, compared to the tabular data. So basically, we fetch the subset of the data from the graph, based on the drug that user is trying to build the flow for, and we feed it into our prompt to be able to generate those flows. And GPT-4 actually performs a lot better in this, compared to older models.
Great. And one more. This was from the chat. I just moved it over. This person's from a healthcare background and writing for healthcare publications. Clinical researchers have expressed the necessity to be knowledgeable about things like knowledge graphs. What additions to the clinical curriculum would you suggest?
So I'm not from an academic background, but I think just like kind of being able to at least understand like just how to take terminologies and ontologies in health domain, and be able to kind of put them into a semantic triple store, RDF owl, right? Like, for example, UMLS, if you're familiar, like Unified Medical Language System, it's a very concept-oriented meta thesaurus. There's an ontology called scores. Like it's a very good fit for something like UMLS. So kind of being able to kind of learn how to take UMLS and put it into scores ontology, I think those would be fairly helpful. And I would stick with semantic triple stores if possible. Property graphs are great for more application-centric kind of use cases, where you're trying to quickly put together something and build a quick app. But if you're kind of more thinking from a point of view of building a more interoperable data model in a knowledge graph, semantic triple stores are the way to go. So yeah.
Okay, I think that was it for the Q&A.
Thanks for joining us, Ravi. That was very interesting. Appreciate it.
Yep,
Thank you.
excellent. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, thank you.